The K9 dog refused to bite the surrounded black boy and exposed a conspiracy in the heart of Wall Street. The dog lunged, then stopped midair. It was the kind of moment that makes time implode, like a bullet that forgets to kill. In the middle of a concrete jungle wired for chaos, it wasn't the boy who disobeyed, but the beast bred for obedience. It was 11:46 a.m. on a humid Thursday in July. The Wall Street heat shimmered against glass towers, and the summer air buzzed not just with money, but with nerves. Outside the Trinity Street subway exit, a circle had formed, police officers, K9 unit in tow, surrounding a lone teenage boy. 17, maybe 18. Skin dark, hoodie gray. He looked like every headline that ever screamed suspect before anyone asked his name. They said he had stolen a phone. The boy's hands were up. His name was Elijah Morrow, but that didn't matter, not yet. What mattered was that someone rich screamed, "Thief!" And that was enough to draw blue uniforms like blood draws sharks. Officer Ray Demps held the leash. His K9, Rex, was bred in Belgium, trained in California, and deployed in New York. Rex had chased down drug dealers, leapt over moving cars, and once disarmed a man with a machete. He had never hesitated. Until now. "Take him, Rex," Demps shouted, jabbing a finger toward Elijah, who stood frozen on the pavement, his eyes locked with the dog's. But Rex didn't move. He stared at Elijah's ears perked, muscles taut, but something about the boy made him whimper instead of growl. Something made him plant his feet and tilt his head, not as a predator, but as a protector. Demps yanked the leash. "Hard. I said go." Rex turned his head, slow, deliberate, not toward Elijah, but toward his handler. His growl started low, unsure at first, then louder, full-throated, defiant. The crowd, previously just murmurs and gasps, erupted. Phones were out now. Recording. Uploading. Hashtagging. Elijah didn't run. He didn't have to. The dog had made the first move. Or, rather, the first refusal. Within 20 minutes, the department had tried to confiscate the footage. But it was too late. The internet had crowned Rex a hero. Memes bloomed like wildfire. Rex knows right from wrong. The dog that dared. Loyal to justice, not orders. But the question everyone missed was this: why? Why had Rex stopped? And why had a boy with no criminal record and no stolen phone ended up with 5 guns pointed at his chest? 3 days later, Elijah's name had finally been cleared. Surveillance footage from a nearby ATM showed him walking past the scene minutes before the alleged theft. No bag, no phone, just earbuds and a half-eaten sandwich. The real thief, as it turned out, was a white banker's son who looked nothing like Elijah except maybe from 100 yards away, if your eyes were trained to see fear where there was none. But this isn't a story about mistaken identity. It's a story about design. Because when the footage went viral, something strange happened. Rex was pulled from active duty, transferred to an evaluation facility in upstate New York. Official story: he'd gone rogue, needed reconditioning. But Demps, in an unguarded moment caught on a hot mic, had muttered something that got scrubbed from the department's statement, but not from Elijah's mind. That mutt knew. That damn dog knew. Knew what? Elijah didn't know. Not yet. But he was about to find out. It started with a knock. A soft, deliberate knock on the door of the apartment Elijah shared with his grandma in Harlem. It came at midnight. Elijah almost didn't open it. But something in the rhythm, double tap, pause, triple tap felt familiar. When he cracked the door, he didn't expect to see a woman in a suit sharp enough to cut air. African-American, mid-30s. No badge, just presence. "I'm Agent Mari Sloan, and I think your friend Rex tried to save your life for a reason. You have 10 seconds to decide if you want to know what that reason is." Elijah blinked. "He's not my friend." "He is now." That's how Elijah found out about Operation Carbon Cage. Mari opened a file thick with redacted lines and pictures that didn't make sense at first: overhead shots of intersections, blueprints of subway stations, and a list of names that all had one thing in common. They were black, under 25, and had incidents involving K9 units. Elijah's name was already on the last page. "None of this is random," Mari said. "They're testing a behavioral profiling program. AI-enhanced targeting, based on race-coded data. But the dogs weren't supposed to know. They're supposed to respond to the keystone of voice, posture, keyword flags. Except Rex disobeyed." Elijah leaned forward. "He didn't bite me because he knew the system was wrong?" "Not new," Mari said. he felt, and that scared the hell out of him. She paused. Because it means someone tampered with Rex's conditioning. Someone inside. Now they were hunting two things, a rogue handler and a dog with a conscience. It was the kind of conspiracy that sounded made up like a Netflix pitch nobody would greenlight because it was too dark, too close to home. But it was real, and it went all the way up to a man named Grant Halden, Wall Street executive, former DARPA consultant, founder of a data company called VeriCent, quietly contracted by NYPD for urban behavior analysis. He was the one who sold them the AI, the one who suggested using dogs to test response optimization in diverse environments. He also happened to be the man whose son actually stole the phone. The deeper Mari and Elijah dug, the uglier it got. Hidden cameras in precinct kennels, heat maps coded in racial data, and a paper trail that led from police training manuals to private equity meetings in the 65th floor of a building overlooking Wall Street. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Rex had already escaped the evaluation center. He was coming back, and he wasn't alone. Rex ran like he'd never run before, through dark woods and silent fences, past security cameras that blinked but didn't see, past guards who napped too close to coffee machines. The evaluation facility in upstate New York had perimeter sensors, motion lights, biometric locks. But it hadn't counted on Rex remembering how to listen, not to commands, but to himself. Somewhere deep in the concrete of his training kennel, someone had whispered into his ear something different from the bite command. Not English, not German, just a hum. Low, pulsing, rhythmic. And it had triggered something. That sound wasn't part of NYPD training. It was older. A pattern embedded during his original programming at the DARPA-funded institute where Rex had been born. It was like pressing a buried button inside his mind, unlocking fragments he didn't even know he had. He remembered a woman's voice, a scent, laughter, something that didn't belong in a war dog's memory. And then the facility gate had opened. Not just unlocked, opened, from the inside. By morning, Rex was on a freight train headed back to Manhattan. Elijah didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed while Agent Sloan scrolled through satellite images on a secure tablet. A red dot blinked in real time. "That's him," she whispered. "You chipped him." "Not me. DARPA did." Elijah rubbed his eyes. "So, you're telling me the government made a dog with better morals than the NYPD?" Mari didn't smile. They didn't mean to. She tapped the screen. The red dot paused for a second outside Harlem under the 145th Street Bridge. Then it moved again. "He's avoiding main roads. How the hell is he doing that?" Elijah looked at the map, heart racing. "Because he's remembering." "Remembering what?" "Me. Wall Street. Marble, metal, money. And beneath it all, systems. Invisible scaffolding, both digital and political, that held up the illusion of fairness." Grant Halden understood that better than anyone. He didn't just build systems. He sold them. And right now, the one he'd sold to NYPD was burning. Not in headlines. Not yet. But in boardrooms. VeriCent's investors were skittish. Congressional committees were circling. One whistleblower had already gone missing. Vanessa DuPont, a software engineer last seen boarding a train to D.C. to testify about algorithmic racial flagging. She never made it. And now Rex, the dog that should have been neutralized, was back in the city. Grant Halden stared out the window of his 65th floor corner office, a tumbler of neat scotch sweating in his palm. "Find the damn animal," he said into his earpiece. "And if that agent is with the boy, handle it. Quietly." A pause. Then, "Make it look like an accident." Elijah met Rex again at dawn. It happened outside a corner bodega on Lenox Avenue. The streets were still wet from the 3 a.m. rain. A cat darted into a trash can. A delivery truck honked somewhere in the distance. And then he saw him. Rex didn't bark. Didn't run. He walked straight up to Elijah and sat, right at his feet. Elijah dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Rex didn't flinch. "Hey boy," Elijah whispered. "You remember me, huh?" Mari stood 10 feet away, watching, silent. It wasn't just reunion. It was recognition. Something in Rex had changed. His body was leaner, his fur flecked with twigs and scratches, but his eyes held something new. Not just intelligence. Purpose. "I think he's leading us," Mari said. "To what?" "To whoever tried to stop him from biting you." Rex stood, turned, and began walking. Elijah followed. So did Mari. The dog took them through back alleys, across parks, under scaffolding, until they reached a parking garage in the financial district abandoned, tagged with graffiti, half condemned. Rex walked in without hesitation. On the third level, they found it. A metal case, buried under a tarp, surrounded by empty paint cans and broken tiles. Mari opened it slowly, gun drawn. Inside, hard drives. Dozens of them. Each labeled. Project Sentinel, Phase 1, Behavioral Map, Harlem Trials, Canine Overlay Training V.4. One was marked in red, Flag Protocol, Ethnic Profile Response Trigger Tests. Elijah froze. They trained the dogs to respond based on race. Mari scanned a drive label. Her jaw tightened. No. Worse. They trained them to choose. Based on data points tied to risk prediction models. Ethnicity just happened to be one of the top variables. You mean they taught them that a black kid with a hoodie was a higher threat than a white guy in a suit? They didn't teach it. They coded it. The dogs just responded. Elijah pointed at Rex. Then why didn't he? Mari looked at him. Because he broke the code. By midday, the internet had shifted. New footage anonymously uploaded showed Grant Halden leaving a closed-door meeting with NYPD brass. The audio was muffled, but a key phrase could be made out. That losses are acceptable if we control the story. The media spun faster. Protesters gathered outside VeriCent headquarters. A subpoena was issued. But Grant had already booked a flight to Zurich. He never made it to the airport. Because on the corner of Church and Barclay, in front of a news camera, in the middle of a growing crowd, Rex walked up to a man in a gray suit and sat. Just sat. People stopped. Watched. The man tried to keep walking. Rex moved with him. Calm. Steady. Until the man snapped. Get away from me. Cameras flashed. Mari pushed through the crowd, badge out. Elijah, that's him, she said, eyes locked on the man. That's one of Halden's field contacts. Look at his briefcase. Rex growled. Low. The man ran. He didn't make it a block. What they found inside the briefcase changed everything. Laminated memos. Unpublished studies. A flash drive labeled, Dogs Can't Lie. Inside the drive, hours of training footage. Some in color, some in infrared. All of it horrifying. Black teens surrounded in staged simulations. Dogs released. Forced compliance. The AI interface monitoring their every twitch. Their hesitation levels scored in real time. And Rex? He was in dozens of those videos. But he always hesitated. Always. Even when the handlers screamed. Even when they used shock collars. Even when they threw in noise, stress, pain. Elijah watched, jaw clenched. He didn't just refuse to bite, he whispered. He resisted programming. Mari nodded. Which means this isn't just a police story. It's a story about a failed experiment. Elijah looked at Rex. No, he said. It's a story about a revolution. It didn't take long for the story to explode. Rex became a symbol, not of justice but of conscience. That maybe, just maybe, the ones taught to obey were finally learning to question. Grant Halden was arrested at a Midtown penthouse 2 days later, found with 3 passports, 2 burner phones, and a go bag filled with euros. He didn't resist, but he did say one thing to the press. The dog ruined everything. By then, it was too late. The Senate called an emergency hearing. NYPD scrambled to distance itself from VeriCent. Agent Sloan was promoted. Elijah got a full scholarship to NYU. And Rex? He retired. But not in a kennel. In a small apartment in Harlem, where he now guarded the boy he'd refused to harm. A boy who had become a man before the world's eyes. A man who now stood behind podiums and told the truth. A man who never forgot that change sometimes begins not with protest, but with disobedience. It wasn't the media frenzy that changed Elijah. It wasn't the interviews or the podcast offers, the university handshakes, or the framed photos of him and Rex on magazine covers. It was a single memento letter. Not digital. Handwritten. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, postmarked from Cleveland. Inside were 3 short lines. I saw what they did. I was one of the programmers. But I didn't know what I was building until I saw that dog stop. I hope you make noise. We didn't. No name. Just those words. It wasn't evidence. But it was guilt. From someone inside. It changed everything. Elijah hadn't planned to speak. He wasn't a public person. He didn't like microphones or the smell of stage lights. But when Mari Sloan told him the hearings were going to be televised, that the country would watch and judge based on what was said, something clicked. They'll roll out their lawyers, she warned. They'll make this about data, not about lives. You've got one chance to make people feel what that dog did. So Elijah took the stand. In a Navy suit loaned by a nonprofit. With trembling hands and a scar on his left elbow, still healing from a fall he took during the media riots. He didn't read from notes. He told them about the way Rex had looked at him that moment of stillness in the chaos. He told them what it felt like to be judged by your skin before your name. And then, as the chamber fell silent, he turned to face the panel of senators and said, "If a dog can be programmed to see color before character, how far do you think your institutions have gone?" The clip went viral within minutes. Senator Marlon Briggs, a hardline centrist, tried to dismiss the story later as emotional testimony, not technical. But public opinion had already shifted. Rex became the face of moral AI, an accidental symbol of resistance, not just against policing abuse but against systems that pretended to be neutral while hiding centuries of bias. Soon, Elijah was asked to speak at Columbia, then at MIT, then at the UN Youth Summit. Each time, he brought Rex. And each time, the story deepened. Because as journalists and investigators followed the very sent paper trail, they uncovered something worse than bias. They found targeting. Emails between executives discussing behavioral suppression strategies in high-risk demographics. One internal memo read, "Public outcry equals noise. Quiet programming equals control. Get the dogs to do the sorting, and no one asks why the arrests skew racial." It was chilling, and it wasn't theoretical anymore. Over 2,400 arrests were linked to cases where very sense behavioral models had been deployed in NYPD pilot zones. 87% of the arrested were Black or Latino. Only 3% resulted in convictions. It wasn't justice. It was profiling in code, and it was unraveling. Meanwhile, Mari Sloan was under fire. Her involvement with Elijah was seen as unauthorized collaboration by some in the Bureau. Old guard agents didn't like how she worked off script, media savvy, unafraid to challenge chain of command. But she didn't care, because Mari had seen this before. In Chicago, in Baltimore, in the systems nobody talked about, the ones built in silence, where funding flowed in through think tanks and out through policy. Mari understood something most didn't. Invisible crimes need visible proof. And this time, they had it. Not just footage, but a dog. A living contradiction to a billion-dollar lie. So when Elijah called her one night with a new idea, she listened. "I want to start something," he said. "A platform. Not just for protest. For tracking systems like VeriSent. For exposing predictive policing wherever it hides." Mari was quiet for a moment. Then, "You want to build the watchdogs." "Exactly. With people. With tech. And with stories. And what are you going to call it?" Elijah looked down at Rex, asleep on his floor, one paw twitching in dream. He smiled. "Sentinel." Sentinel launched quietly, but it didn't stay quiet. At first it was just a website with a database, some early documentation, and a call for whistleblowers. But then the public started sending footage. Former officers uploaded training slides. A disillusioned software engineer posted raw datasets from a precinct in Oakland. Within 6 months, Sentinel had over 1 million users. It became a hybrid, part journalism, part watchdog, part technical repository. AI engineers worked pro bono to reverse engineer flawed policing algorithms. Civil rights groups used the data to file lawsuits. University students created dashboards mapping racial disparities in facial recognition use. And always, in the background, Rex. Elijah didn't use him as a mascot. He let him live. But when they published Sentinel's first official case, filling in a program in Phoenix that used drone surveillance to flag high-crime faces, they did it with a watermark on the homepage. A silhouette of a German shepherd, eyes forward, standing between a boy and a badge. VeriSent collapsed the following year. Its stock plummeted. Executives resigned. One died by suicide. But the world didn't change overnight. NYPD replaced the contract with a new firm, one with a shinier name and friendlier marketing. And the algorithms kept evolving. More discreet, more sanitized. Which is why Elijah kept working. Which is why Rex kept following. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a dog. It was about disobedience. About the courage to stop, even when everything, your training, your orders, your fear tells you to move. It was about the decision that changed everything. To sit, to look, and to say, without a word, this isn't right. They tried to erase him. Not Elijah, he was too public now, but Rex. In the months after Sentinel went global, a quiet campaign began. Whispered pieces in media outlets about the danger of anthropomorphizing police animals. Op-eds claiming Rex's refusal was anomalous, coincidental, and not a sign of awareness. A segment on a major cable network even suggested, perhaps the dog had a malfunction. Elijah laughed when he saw it. A malfunction? He repeated, standing in front of a lecture hall of undergrads. You mean empathy? The audience laughed with him, but the truth lingered under the joke. There were still people who couldn't accept what had happened. Couldn't believe that a machine bred for control had chosen restraint. Because if Rex had chosen, then the system had been wrong all along. So they tried to frame him as broken. And one day, someone tried to make it permanent. It happened in Central Park. Elijah took Rex for walks early, before the noise of the city came alive. That morning, the air was heavy with fog. The grass slick with dew. They were near the reservoir when Rex stiffened. Then bolted. He didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just ran full tilt across the path and tackled a man near the bushes. By the time Elijah reached them, Rex had the man's arm in his mouth, not biting, just holding. Pinned beside him was a black bag. Inside, a syringe, laced with neurotoxin. Police later traced the would-be assassin to a private contracting firm once affiliated with Verisent. The motive? Close the loop. Rex saved Elijah. Again. But the message was clear, they were still being watched. After that, things changed. Elijah was offered federal protection. Turned it down. I don't want to hide, he said. That's what they want. Instead, he doubled down. Sentinel added new branches education programs, legal workshops, AI ethics labs. Mari helped build the intel side. Together, they trained a new generation of watchdogs. Not with guns, with code, with awareness, and with questions. Because the true power of Sentinel wasn't in the data. It was in the refusal to accept silence. 3 years later, Elijah returned to Wall Street. Not as a protester, as a speaker. The Economic Ethics Forum had invited him grudgingly, perhaps to give a keynote on algorithmic accountability. Half the room expected a PR-friendly message, a safe, clean speech about policy and reform. They didn't get that. Instead, Elijah walked on stage in a black suit, with Rex beside him, older now but proud, poised. He began with no slides. Just words. I was 17 when a circle of police officers pointed guns at me for a crime I didn't commit. What saved me wasn't law. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even luck. It was a dog. A trained animal who should have followed an order but didn't. He paused. Some of you will say that's not a system failure. You'll call it an outlier. A glitch. I call it the moment the lie cracked. He spoke for 20 minutes. Not about what happened, but about what continues to happen. How the logic of power finds new tools every year. Machine learning, facial recognition, behavioral prediction. And how it masks itself in efficiency. But when your efficiency decides who's dangerous based on skin tone, clothing, or zip code, then it's not data. It's discrimination in code. He ended with one question. Who is your Rex? Then he walked off stage. Rex followed. The room didn't clap at first. Then someone stood. Then another. Until the applause echoed across a space built for money and now, maybe, something more. Rex passed 2 years later. Peacefully. Elijah held him in his arms as the vet administered the final injection. He whispered stories into the dog's ear, even as his own tears soaked the fur on Rex's neck. You saved me, he said. You made me believe something better was possible. He buried Rex in a private plot outside the city. Mari was there. So were members of the Sentinel team. They said a few words, but mostly, they just sat. Sometimes, silence is the only way to honor something that can't be replaced. A week later, a small bronze statue was unveiled at the entrance to Sentinel headquarters. It showed Rex, sitting, alert, watching. Beneath it, a plaque. He refused. And that changed everything. Years passed. Technology changed. So did cities. But Sentinel endured. It expanded internationally. Built open-source watchdog platforms in South Africa, Brazil, and the Philippines. Worked with ethics councils to create new AI compliance frameworks. developed simulation programs to train law enforcement without racial bias. Elijah led from the front, not as a savior, as a survivor who refused to let the story die. In interviews, he always gave credit where it was due. To Rex, he'd say, the one who didn't bite, and to the idea that sometimes the first act of justice's refusal. The final time Elijah told the story publicly was 10 years after that summer day on Wall Street. It was at a school. Elementary. The kids sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide, some with lunch still smeared on their cheeks. He told them the story like a fable, not about police or algorithms or race, but about a dog. A long time ago, he said, there was a dog who was trained to obey. But one day, he met someone who wasn't a threat, even though everyone else said he was. And the dog had to decide. He let the sentence hang, then said softly, he chose kindness, and that made him braver than anyone else. One child raised her hand. Was the boy okay? Elijah smiled. He is now. The bell rang. They scattered, but one little boy lingered. He walked up to Elijah and tugged on his sleeve. Is the dog still alive? He asked. Elijah crouched. No, he said gently, but he lives here now. He tapped the boy's chest, and the child nodded, very seriously, then whispered, I would have sat too. Elijah nodded back. Good, he said. That's how it starts. Because this wasn't a story about a dog. Not really. It was a story about defiance. About the moment Simeone says no to the machinery of injustice. Not loudly, not violently, just clearly. And in doing so, reminds the world. Obedience is easy. Conscience is hard. But only one of them changes history. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.